Hi guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be presenting a young professional's guide to the professional world. I'm Eli.
I'm Soha.
I'm Nyla. And I'm Sophia.
And the chapters we're going to be covering are going to be 23 through 25. So what these chapters provide is just kind of general guidelines and principles to follow when you're in a professional work environment. So the first part we're going to be covering is professionalism, the next part is integrity, and then being coachable. So what these chapters talk about is just general conduct and things to kind of keep in mind when you're in the work environment, and things to not do as well. So Sophia is going to talk about professionalism in the workplace.
Okay, guys. So professionalism, I think we all kind of have an idea of what it is. Okay. So it's being yourself and acting the part, and professionalism doesn't just necessarily mean in the workplace. It means if you're in school like how we are, or if you're out with your coworkers, or if you're out with people of authority. Professionalism, you should have that in all of the situations. So the key theme is to try to separate your work life from your personal life, but that doesn't mean that they cross over. So there's times when you go out to a team building activity, or you go out to lunch with your manager for something. Those are things that are personal life, but you're still considering your work life, and you should still have professionalism. So you shouldn't just drop all professionalism when you walk out of the building of your office or your workplace, because like I said, there could be a coworker that you're meeting, or if you think they're your friend, but things can get around, so you want to keep having that professionalism. It's sort of similar how everyone always says, watch what you post online, watch what you say, because it can always end up back in the workplace. So anything can end up back. Let's say that you're friends with a coworker, you think you're friends, but then you say something about their other friend that's your coworker. They might tell them, and that might get back to your manager, and then they'll have that idea that you're not being professional outside of the workplace, and they won't trust you in higher positions of responsibility, and it could hinder your reputation that you've built up. So the quick tip, I think a lot of people have heard the term, don't say anything that you wouldn't say in front of your grandmother. It's basically the same thing. Your grandma is like your authority, or your grandma is like your elderly. Respect your elderly, and your boss is like your authority, sort of the same thing. So don't say anything that you wouldn't be comfortable saying to your boss. And then the book covers the dope and the star, which we've heard before. So things that the dope would do, making a joke at an inappropriate time. So that can be doing a presentation, like giggling, or if you're like in class and you say an inappropriate joke, or you're just talking while the teacher's talking, things like that. Treating someone with disrespect, obviously that's not okay and it's not professional. That can be inside or outside of the workplace. And then the dope isn't aware that there is a crossover between your work life and your personal life. And then the star, their professional dress and their demeanor, both inside and outside of the workplace, and they act appropriate under pressure. They don't like backlash or say things like if you're mad, especially the outside workplace, because if you post something angry, that can come back to you. And they realize that there may always be someone listening or watching, and then that one slip up could ruin your reputation that you built up. And then the quick tip also over here is just beware online. If you don't want someone seeing what you're doing outside of the workplace, change your privacy settings. If it's public, you can't get mad that it comes back to haunt you in the future. But all this being said, professionalism doesn't mean putting on this fake attitude. You can still be yourself. It's just kind of tying back to emotional intelligence and knowing when is the appropriate time to do something or say something, but still be yourself, of course, in the end. And then we have a quick video for tips on just a couple more ways to be professional.
8 tips on professionalism in the workplace. Tip number 1, make being on time a priority. Being late for work or meetings gives the impression that you are unprepared and don't care about your job. Not only does this apply to start times, but also returning from lunch breaks. Tip number 2, dress appropriately. Not every workplace requires a suit and tie, so whatever clothing is accepted should always be neat and clean. Flip-flops, shorts, or tank tops should be saved for the weekend. Refrain from wearing anything too revealing. Tip number 3, stay positive. We all have our days, but we shouldn't take it out on our coworkers or patients in a healthcare setting. Leave the negativity at home and make the best out of your situation. Tip number 4, watch your mouth. There's no place for swearing at work. Using bad language seems as if you have a limited vocabulary. Tip number 5, offer to help colleagues. A true professional is willing to help his or her coworkers when they're overburdened. They aren't afraid to share knowledge, opinions, or simply an extra pair of hands. One person's success reflects well on everyone in the workplace. Tip number 6, don't hide from your mistakes. Take responsibility. Don't be afraid to take ownership of your errors and do your best to correct them so you don't make the same mistake twice. Tip number 7, don't lie. Dishonesty never makes anyone look good, whether it's lying on one's resume or calling in sick. A true professional is upfront and doesn't hide the truth. And lastly, tip number 8, fight fair. It's inevitable that there will be disagreements in the workplace.
Those are just tips that you should use in the workplace and also in your daily life. And now I'll pass it on to Sohan to talk about integrity.
Thank you, Sophia. All right, so like we talked about, professionalism is sort of how you carry yourself in the workplace. Integrity is sort of how you carry yourself when no one's around. When you're on your own, or you may be in a situation that doesn't seem risk-worthy, but taking small actions and bending the lines a little bit can really reflect poorly on your reputation and in the end your professional career. So let's start off with being uncompromising. Whether you're talking about a simple case of academic plagiarism or cheating on a test, or you're talking about Tiger Woods' infidelity, these things can really, really hurt you as referenced in the text. They must be all or nothing. Reputations are not parts of a game. They're a zero-sum game, meaning even those with a 30 or 40-year-long career that has spanned multiple bounds can have those tarnished very simply and with a really small act. So one must make sure to keep that on lock all the time. And then lastly, seemingly harmless acts can change the tide of professional status. So as we talked about in tip 7 over the video, it's important to be honest, be trustworthy, and make sure that you're fighting fair. That really relates to the text, in which what the author was saying was, even though you may perceive an act as being beneficial or good for your company or yourself, a lot of times that act can actually reflect poorly on your colleagues and your teammates, and really may impact your personal reputation as well. So a quick tip is be honest. A lot of times when we're confronted with a tough question or a tough decision to make, a lot of times the natural thing to do is lie. Cover it up, move on, continue with your day. But it's totally fine to say, I don't know. Like if you ask me a question right now of, what did I have for lunch 2 years ago? It's an odd question, but I would say I don't know instead of making it up. Bad example, but make sure you follow that. All right, so as we referenced earlier, the two sort of types of people that we have, the dopes and the star. The real discerning characteristic between the two is the ability to bend the lines. A lot of times you'll see dopes bend those lines and in the end actually forget what the lines are. So what seemingly is good may be bad, and what seemingly bad may be good. And then in the case of the star, integrity is number one. They will make sure that even though some small wins may come in easily, that they don't bend these lines to get them. And then a quick tip on that is, again, one of those really small things, make sure you use company equipment appropriately. The company equipment is not your equipment. That's very important to note that. And you never know, somebody in cybersecurity or something may be looking at your laptop. So be very careful of what you download, be very careful of what you're viewing, and just follow those tips to make sure you stay involved with a high level of integrity throughout your professional career. Next, I'll pass it on to Natalie to talk about coachability.
Alright guys, so we've talked about professionalism and integrity. Now I'm going to tell you guys about the ability to be coachable. So I'm covering chapter 25, which is the ability to be coachable. And in chapter 25, the author provides us with an anecdote, and he's telling us about how he had an interview at AT&T. So he was being interviewed at AT&T, and at the end of his interview, the interviewer actually put his pen down and his notebook down. He was like, I'm going to give you a few tips about interviewing skills and what I think you could improve on. So instead of being egotistical, McDaniel actually put his resume down, turned his resume over, and started taking notes on what the interviewer was telling him. And so that eventually helped him, and the interviewer saw that he was very coachable. He actually ended up getting the job at AT&T. So McDaniel actually ended up finding himself in a very similar situation a few years down the road. a female came in and he was interviewing her for a job, and he saw some errors that she was making during her interview. So at the end of her interview, he also gave her a few tips on interviewing skills and what he thinks that she could do better. At the end of the interview, she left. When she went home, she emailed him, and as a response, he thanked her for sending an email as a follow-up, and he was very impressed with her ability to be coachable rather than her screaming and like throwing a fit, and she actually ended up getting the job. And then now I'm going to pass it on to Eli to tell you guys how to apply this chapter into real life.
All right, so real quick with a quick show of hands, does anybody here had experience in an internship position or maybe full-time work that's a professional environment? Okay, awesome. So a lot of this is stuff that you guys probably already know or probably already apply in your everyday lives. So as far as being professional, you want to be yourself, but you want to be aware of the norms in your workplace, right? So for example, I don't know how close you guys are with your bosses, but some bosses will be okay with you calling them by their first name, whereas other bosses, maybe they're way above you, it'd be strictly sir, ma'am, or calling them by their last name, right? So that's just something that you want to make yourself aware of and be conscious of in the workplace and outside of the workplace, right? So sometimes you might hang out with coworkers. It's not required or a necessity to hang out with your coworkers outside of work, but if you do, you want to make sure that you know what the boundaries are while you are working together and when you're outside of the workplace, right? And then being honest, that one's pretty self-explanatory, guys. If you're just honest with yourself, with your coworkers, with your bosses, you won't ever find yourself in a situation where your integrity is being jeopardized, right? So know what's acceptable use of your equipment while you're at work. Know what's acceptable as far as policies go. A lot of jobs will have policies as far as social media goes, personal use of laptops and phones at work. So just know what's right and wrong within the workplace, right? And then as far as being coachable, nobody here is perfect, right? So it's inevitable that you're going to be criticized, you're going to receive feedback, whether it be in your work, whether it be on personal habits. So the way that you take that can make a big effect on how people see you, right? You can choose to either be resentful and maybe not be as productive as a result of receiving this feedback, or you can take it to heart, you can improve yourself and get even better based off that feedback or criticism. So now I'm going to pass it back on to Sohan so he can conclude and go over our quiz.
All right, so in conclusion, we talked a little bit about the different facets of being a professional individual. A lot of you will find after graduation, when you move on to these corporate positions, that when you're in an organization that has that sort of organizational goal and focus, it's very important that you separate all of the personal areas of your life from the professional areas of your life. That brings us to our first point, being professional. The second one can actually be applied to both your personal life and your professional life. Have integrity. Make sure that whatever you're doing, you're always doing it under the right circumstances and making sure that you're not bending any truths, evils, or goods to make sure you hit your goal. And then lastly, be coachable. The reason you're all in college and the reason we're all in college is to learn. But that learning shouldn't stop at the cusp of your graduation. That learning always keeps continuing, and the importance of coachability in a corporate environment is not lost. So in conclusion, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Our quiz is right here, and we welcome any questions you might have.